Economic analysts predict a steady decline in Nigeria's inflation rate, with projections placing it at 15% by the end of 2025. This prediction confirms President Tinubu's forecast in the 2025 budget, stating that inflation will decrease to 15% this year. Financial experts express confidence in this forecast, citing economic stability and a broader inflation basket that reduces reliance on fuel prices.
National Bureau of Statistics, NBS, reported a drop in inflation from 24.1% in January 2025 to 23.18% in February. The report attributed the decline in headline inflationary pressures to notable reductions in prices of general staples, amongst others. When President Bola Tinubu reiterated his administration's commitment to reducing inflation from 34.6% to 15% by year-end, analysts were cautious about the feasibility of this target. Inflation surged following the removal of petrol subsidies and exchange rate unification, leading to economic concerns. Now, join us this morning to discuss inflationary projections and the reality of Nigerians is financial expert and principal partner at Woodridge & Scott Consulting, Mr. Segun Sopitan. A warm welcome to you, and thanks for joining us on Breakfast Central this morning.
Good to see you, Benga. Thanks for having me. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Now, Mr. Sopitan, just looking at the figures, this 15% drop in inflation by the end of this year, is this realistic or just wishful thinking?
It depends on where you want to come from. I mean, look, inflation just dropped from 34% to 24% magically, right? So anything is possible. So I don't know how else you want to achieve a further 10% drop in inflation before the end of the year. That will be pretty much magic. So what I'm saying is it's extremely unlikely unless some manipulation happens again. Because that's what we've seen. That's why we're at 24% now. There's been a manipulation of the numbers. And I think it's important that we call it as it is. If you look at what's been done to the CPI basket and to the methodology for calculating inflation, you find that we were basically working towards the answer. We've reduced the percentage of food in the food basket, the weight assigned to food products in the CPI basket by a whole 10%, when in reality, food spend on food by the average Nigerian on a monthly basis represents about 60% of their monthly spend, according to the NBS itself. So these manipulations, are damaging the credibility of our data, of the government's data agency, and it's not good for the economy. So in summary, unless there's some dramatic event, it's extremely unlikely that we would achieve 15% inflation, by the end of 2025.
When you say manipulations, are you also referring to the consumer price index and the rebates that occurred?
Yes, absolutely. I'm saying, the biggest manipulation of that number is changing the reference year to 2024. And I hear a lot of economists and experts just sort of double around the issue and, refusing to call it what it is. It is manipulation. Because what we've tried to do is to eliminate the strongest inflection points in the last 3 or 4 years that has brought us to where we are. So the inflation number we're looking at today has eliminated the impact of the petrol subsidy removal, has eliminated the impact of COVID, and the shutdown and the recession that we went into that came with a lot of inflationary pressures as well. And all of that has been taken out of the picture, and we're looking at inflation now from a prism of what's happened between last year and this year. That time frame is simply not going to tell you the real picture. And that's why we have a situation where we're now saying inflation is 24%, and it now looks as if it's not so unrealistic to achieve 15%. The truth is that inflation today in Nigeria is nowhere near 24%. In fact, even the 34% that we had before was not accurate, because the CPI, the components of the CPI basket, was grossly misrepresentative of the realities on ground. So unfortunately, we fixed that problem, and then created a bigger problem by tampering with the number of numbers in the model.
I mean, Mr. Sopitan, what you're basically saying is we're shifting the goalposts. But let's talk about the facts on ground. Let's x-ray the policies of this administration. Are they hurting or are they helping? The Tinubu administration has introduced several economic policies to curb inflation. What would you say has been the most effective, and which ones do you think still need more work?
So I think it's also important to say that, as it stands today, prices have stabilized. So if you ignore the manipulation, if you ignore the changing of the reference here, the truth is prices are no longer rising as quickly as they were before. And I'm sure that even you guys, would attest to that. If you go to the market today, price of rice, a bag of rice is probably about the same as it was 6 months ago. In fact, the price of PMS has actually come down by almost 300 naira. So inflation is moderating. My challenge is that the number that we're brandishing around it is not a true representation of where we are. So if we had not done this tampering, we would have had inflation maybe trending around 30% now, which would have been a more realistic reflection of the truth. It still wouldn't have been accurate, but at least would have been closer to the truth. In terms of the policies of the administration, look, what this administration has focused on is fiscal balance, is the fiscal structure of the economy. And unfortunately, that's not the total picture. What happens within the economy does not depend only on whether we're fiscally responsible and balanced or not. There's actually the real issue that we should be focusing on should be the productivity of Nigerians and productivity of the economy. Productive activities that would drive growth is what we should have been focusing on. So if you look at the attempts to fix the fiscal issues, you could say that it has worked, that subsidy removal has resulted in bigger revenues for government. But where is the effect and the impact of that on Nigerians? Where's the money? Where's all the savings?
And that's the mindset that, we hear a number of Nigerians saying, regardless of the numbers, we're still feeling the pinch of the
cost
prices
of living
of goods and services. Segun Sopitan, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We will have to wrap up the conversation and, quite frankly, the show at this moment. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Have a good day.